Welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show, where you'll learn how to grow your team today. Join Ken Trupke and his guests as they discuss what works and doesn't work to grow your team in today's world. And now, your host, Ken Trupke.
Hello and welcome to the Clarity Advisor Show. Working together is how we get things done. And if you've thought about starting a business, you're going to be by yourself at first, but sooner or later, you're going to need a team. My guest today started his business in 2015 by himself and very quickly started building a team. So Matt Baxter runs Wedge, which is an online HR video software company. We'll let him fill in the details. Welcome, Matt Baxter.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on, spending some time with us. So go ahead and jump in with Wedge. Tell us about Wedge, what it is you do, who you serve, and how you got that started.
Yeah, so our amazing tagline is authentic connections at scale. So we help connect candidates and companies. So we specifically service high volume hiring organizations, retail, restaurant, hospitality groups. We are a video interviewing solution, different than Zoom. When you think video, we are specifically an asynchronous video interview tool. Oftentimes it replaces entry-level phone screens or entry interview processes. So I started the business in college. And it's been a blast ever since. It was back in 2015 when we first launched, started to grow. And then fortunately, COVID being in the video interview space was actually very good to us. We really started to grow quite a bit. And ever since then, we've been servicing a boatload of customers and thousands and if not hundreds of thousands of candidates as well. So it's been an absolute blast. We love what we do.
That's fantastic. So take us back to 2015. You're a junior in college. What's prompting you to think I should start a business?
Yeah. So a little background on the story. So this is actually business number 2. I previously owned a landscape and lawn care company. And so when I was hiring for my lawn care company, I didn't really care if somebody knew how to mow a lawn or weed whack. I cared, can you shake my hand? Can you have a conversation? Can you be personable? If you can do those things, I could teach you the rest. And so I fortunately had a chance to sell the lawn care company, and it fueled the idea for what Wedge is today, because I wanted to create a platform that allowed candidates to have an opportunity to shine above and beyond like a resume or a cover letter. And I wanted companies to have a better understanding of who people truly are as they go about hiring them. And so the idea on the napkin was, let's create a platform that does that, and let's do so through video. And video is a powerful mechanism. And so ever since then, I started talking to a bunch of employers and business owners and HR managers, and they all said the same thing. And so we launched the company in 2015, and I'm sure we'll dive a bit more, but that's kind of how it all originally started.
All right. So a couple things on that. So one, I just got to ask, you're a junior in college. How are you thinking about the resume process and the interview process and the hiring process? Those don't seem like things the typical junior in college is dialed into and thinking like, I need to bring a solution to the marketplace for that. So how do you get there?
Yeah. I mean, so two sides of the house. One side was owning a lawn care company that I probably had hired 25 or 30 people through the years. And when I say hired, that could be buddies, that could be somebody made a referral, that could be, I posted an ad or whatever it was. And I wasn't extensively looking at resumes or doing background checks or any of those things. It was literally, I had like 70 accounts that I was mowing, and a lot of them might have been older ladies or older gentlemen or whatever it may be. And I needed people who I could feel comfortable they could go knock on the door and talk to my customers. And if they could do that, I could teach them how to mow lawn, or I could teach them how to weed whack or whatever it may be. So that's on one side. I started to think about the interview process and the hiring process, at least what worked for me as a small business owner. The flip side of that was, as a junior in college, all of my friends were applying for internships and sales jobs and entry-level jobs, and they all said the same thing. Unless I have a 4.0 GPA, I'm probably not going to get that job at XYZ company because I don't meet their qualifications. And so it was sad to me because there are so many remarkably talented individuals and talented people that may not look great on paper, and companies miss the opportunity to understand who they are because all they're doing is looking at resumes and then filtering out. All they're doing is looking at cover letters and filtering them out. And so that's why I had a little bit of a unique perspective as a business owner, but also as a college student, sort of living in both worlds. That was basically the spark to the idea.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. Especially coming from.
Going from landscaping to HR tech is not necessarily the most normal path. So I will acknowledge that.
Yeah, no, but I see the connection. And you were hiring people, and you had friends looking to get those internships and going through that process. So you're in that space. That makes sense. It strikes me as, yeah, just interesting that you say I'm going to bring a better solution to the marketplace. I think that's great. Now, you did say we started it in 2015. So talk about the actual evolution of things. How did you go from you to we to whatever it's looking like today?
Yeah. So, it's the original idea for the business was mine. I started it, I launched it, and I brought on a partner, and the partner was another fellow student at from Hope that I went with, and we both worked on it together. And on the side, we also hired a dev shop to actually start working on the product of Wedge. And so I'll get to that part of the story in a second. But ultimately, as we start working on the business, we had different sort of paths of the way that we wanted to go about running the business and time dedication and all that. So I ended up actually, after about a year and a half, I bought that partner out, and I brought in one of our technical co-founders who was working at the dev shop at the time, working on the project. And then from there, we hired our first employee who started working on sort of the customer success and sort of the operations of the business. And he ultimately became sort of quote unquote a co-founder. And so our team expanded sort of early on, basically by need. So I'm not a software developer. I'm an ideas guy, salesperson, go raise capital. And so bringing on somebody who could actually help develop the product, certainly early on, made a lot of sense. And then also, as we start to scale quite a bit, we need help on the customer success side. We need help talking to customers. We need help on the operations side of things. And that's where the need started. So, in basically 2018, 2019, we were really getting the product off the ground, meaning we were, it was 3, 4, 5 of us. And then, 2020, 2021, we hired 1 or 2 at a time. And then starting now, or basically about end of 2020, beginning of 2021, we had 5 or 6 full-time employees. We now have just under 20. And so we've almost tripled in size in basically a year. Now, granted, small numbers, it's not like we have hundreds, but going from 3 to 4 people to 6 to 7 to 20 in a hurry obviously has some challenges and some joys, but that's kind of the transition of how we got there.
Okay. Yeah. Tripling is tripling, and it's an effort, and there's challenges. Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about this. Tell me about, I see potential for irony. So you've got a hiring software interviewing system. How did you go about hiring those team members to go from the 3 to 6 to 18?
I am proud to say this. I think between the lawn care and Wedge, I think I've hired just over 50 people now, and I've never looked at a resume, and I still firmly believe in that. I'm not necessarily intentionally against looking at resumes, but to me, most of the hiring decisions and hiring basis, it doesn't come from that. It's people's stories, people's background, context of the business. So I'll give you a prime example. We hired a company president who stepped in and runs the day-to-day operations of our company about a year and a half ago. Well, 2 years prior to that, he was a board member of mine. So he was a part of our board and a part of board meetings. And he also comes from the space, literally had an exit in the video interviewing HR tech space. And so he made sense to join on and be a part of our team. And so I've had everything from that to dev shop folks to sales folks as well too. And each sort of employee, a part of Wedge, has a different story of why they're here and how we got them here. But I certainly use our video interview product. Every candidate, every person who works for us goes through a Wedge, as we call it, a Wedge or video interview. But also, just a huge piece of it is understanding much more about who people are. When you work for a startup, not only every day is different, there's chaos, things don't go as planned. I mean, that's just a normal part of the day. That's not even the bad stuff. And so when people come and work for us, you can't figure out any of those things from a resume. You really have to know who that person is and what their desires are and what calls them to do the work that they're doing. And so that's how ultimately we've gone about hiring. Is it's much more predicated and around who the person is sitting across from us, opposed to just a single sheet of paper.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And so we talk about building and growing your team here on the podcast. And so how do you, what are you actually asking people? What questions are you asking? And what's that process? I mean, go deep on the tactical. What do you actually do if you're not looking at a resume? How are you finding out about them? What's that look like? What questions? How many times? All those kind of things.
Yeah, so a lot of the people who work for us have sort of been long-term relationships, or relationships that weren't initially formed when we had them apply or post the job. They've actually been sort of recruited positions, and probably more than 50% of the time we've hired somebody was not when we had a job opening. It was more, we met this person, or we know this person, or we have this need in the company, and it might not be a specific job, but it was like, okay, great, let's make this happen. So I'll give you a prime example. Our director of sales, Kelly, she comes from an HR tech background, right? Her background is helping build and consult to sales teams and organizations. She's worked full time with others, but also has been a consultant. And so when I first got introduced to her about 6 months ago, a year ago, it was, hey, let's just shoot some ideas around in this space. You're in HR tech, we're in HR tech, and we just built a friendship, right? And then all of a sudden I realized, wow, we need some like sales operations. We actually need some help. So she started as a consultant for us, and then all of a sudden it was like, she's having too much fun, whether she would say that or not. But also we had a huge need to say, the value that you bring to our organization is something I couldn't even put a job description together for. This is exactly what our need is. And so again, is that scalable when you start getting to 200, 300, 400 employees? Maybe not. But as far as a scrappy startup getting to where we are, we've kind of done it by saying, hey, we either see this person having huge impact for the organization, or we have this huge need, and that's what we're going to go try to go fill. I think people look far and wide and way further than they need to at times when it comes to great talent. I think sometimes great talent is sitting right in front of you. And I want to get really to the point around what you ask. I think one of the most important things to me as a leader is actually understanding what's the driving force behind what somebody wants to do. And a mentor of mine has a theory out there called the jobs to be done theory. And it's thinking about goods and services around, they actually do a job for you rather than you purchasing a good or a service. Well, one of the things that I'd like to know is, what job is our job doing for you? I know that's a little confusing, but literally what job or what void in your life is our company going to do for you? So if it's a salesperson, is it coming on part of a team? Is it a dev person who really, really wants to just sink their teeth into something specific opposed to a bunch of different projects? Is it, I want to have a lasting impact in HR tech? Whatever it may be, I want to get to know what is that driving force behind who somebody is and what job are they ultimately looking for. And if it fits what our needs are in the company and their purpose behind what they go to work for, that's what I'm ultimately looking for when it comes to teammates.
Okay. So it's mostly people you know. I'm assuming there's been some people you didn't know before you brought them in. For those people, what was the process?
Yeah, it's probably 50-50. So we've definitely posted jobs and hired through that. Some of it's like, hey, we need a software developer and we're going to go recruit. And some of that's me just literally sending messages on LinkedIn until I find somebody who I think is a good fit for us. And then it's like a typical application process where we'll have them go through a Wedge, we'll have them submit their resume, we'll have them, and not necessarily do we always look at it, but go through the process of that. We'll have them, go through sort of maybe a little bit of background check and that whole process. And then we'll obviously bring them in person, see if there's a good fit with the team. We've made a habit actually in the last 3 or 4 hires about having somebody come work with us for a day. If they can, of course, some people are in jobs that wouldn't allow that to happen, but it's great having somebody just sit with us for half a day and just experience what a typical day in the life, quote unquote, is. And oftentimes people are like, yeah, I'm falling in love with this. I want to work with a team. I want to work with people. We've done that, I think, with the last 3 or 4 hires, and it's worked out great.
That's really interesting. And so is the team local? Is everybody like in a room, or are this virtual things and virtual ride-alongs?
Yeah, so just about everybody. Well, we have, I think, 18 on the team, 17 on the team, and 12 are in the greater West Michigan, Grand Rapids area, and the other 5 are around the country. So our last couple of hires have been in person, or one of them's in Chicago, and he's here, once a month, if not more. So it's not necessarily in person, but in person enough.
All right. Good. Well, I want to dig into some questions around mistakes you've made and wins you've had. I continue to be interested in this idea of not looking at the resume. So how do you actually find people? And of course, I want to know what it means to go through a wedge. And we'll do all those things on the other side of the break. We'll be right back on the Clarity Advisor Show.
Is your business where you want it to be, or on track to get there? Clarity Advisors helps business leaders improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success. We specialize in helping you streamline your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Call or text Ken at 616-822-9700 2998 to have a complimentary 12-minute call to see what some clarity could do for you.
Okay, we're back on the Clarity Advisor Show talking with Matt Baxter. Matt, your company's name is Wedge. Tell us where that comes from and then where that phrase going through a wedge or having a wedge or how you describe using the product.
Yeah, so I got to give much love. One of my good buddies, Gavin Midlum, actually is the one who came up with the name Wedge, and he actually has a career sort of in that space. And the idea behind Wedge was we wanted to create a wedge in the hiring process between interviews and resumes. We wanted to be smack dab, sort of supplementing what a resume may be, and right before what a typical first interview is. I think as we've gotten more and more ambitious, I might say things like, I hope to get rid of resumes forever. But in reality, people still use them and they still serve a purpose. And so we want to supplement what a resume is, and we want to lead up to a great in-person interview or a virtual interview. So we're going to wedge ourselves right in that process.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so back to the actual hiring process. You're building a team. It's you and a couple guys, and you're just getting started. And now you're looking to go from, what was it, like 3 to 6, and then you tripled again up to around 18 or so. So tell us about some of the good moves you made and some of the lessons you learned maybe through making some mistakes in both of those stages, the 3 to 6 and the 6 to 18.
So I think probably the biggest mistakes we would make is I'm a firm believer of hire fast and fire fast. I think people let things drag along longer than they should. And I think also people are a little bit too risk averse. I think some of the greatest employees end up being surprises and aren't necessarily what they look like on paper, if you will. And so, I think some of the biggest mistakes I've made, and this also includes the lawn care company, is letting somebody who might be a better fit somewhere else stick around longer than they should. And sometimes that's costly. Sometimes that's just like getting your own ego aside. I mean, sometimes, letting somebody go is a really, really freaking hard thing to do, no matter who you are. And so, you try to make things work. You try to figure out a better system, a better position for them. And sometimes they're just better off served somewhere else. So I think for me, as a somewhat younger leader, it's learning, kind of dropping my ego and figuring out what's best for the company and best for that person, opposed to them liking me, if you will. So certainly I think that's one big mistake. I also think one of the biggest mistakes I make as a leader, often is not necessarily giving clarity, as much clarity as I think I do. I'm a communicator and I'm an ideas person. And I am much more of a founder than a CEO, which is probably its own other podcast as well. But I'm somebody who loves big ideas, loves dreaming big, loves putting sort of big picture things into place. And sometimes when it comes to, okay, I need somebody to be the operations behind this, I don't necessarily give them the clarity that they need. And that's less around necessarily hiring and firing, but it's more around how to build a great team that sort of knows the vision and knows what they're going for. And so there's definitely been plenty of times I've been smacked in the face where, wow, okay, that was my fault because I didn't give clarity. I didn't give the clarity that people need. And so I certainly have found those two as big mistakes that we've made. I think I joke our team is kind of the island of misfit toys. It's one of the most unique, interesting group of people. But I think it's one of the reasons why we're so great. I think we have such a unique set of ideas, unique set of backgrounds, big visions. And so I think our team is world-class. And I think as a scrappy startup, you can't always pay the highest wages. You can't always, do unique things like that or the best benefit packages or whatever it may be. But I think we've, because of my vision and I think because of my leadership, but I also think because of each individual person on our team, I do believe that we've assembled one of the greatest teams. And I have to attribute that to all the other team members about just helping people be great at our company. And so I really believe in our team. I believe in the people, and everybody's not going to last here forever. And there's going to be plenty of new faces. But all around, I think we've hired really, really well.
So you mentioned that you brought people on sometimes when you met the person and wanted them on the team and kind of find the need later, and other times you had a need and then found the person connected. How intentional have you been about these are the slots we have and these are the positions we need to fill over some planned timeline? It doesn't strike me that you've been particularly intentional about that, and that's okay. I'm just curious how that's worked for you and what that looked like.
If I'm going to say that there's any science to it, it's mainly because I'm lazy and I like hiring people to do things that I don't want to do. Basically, to keep it simple, is I'm never going to learn to build code. So why not bring on somebody who is phenomenal at writing code? I'm not necessarily good at operationalizing the business. So why not bring on somebody who's good at operationalizing the business? I don't have the capacity to cold call 100 people a day. So why not bring on somebody who's capable of cold calling every single day? Now that we've got a bunch of people who work in sales, I'm not necessarily somebody who's going to go manage a bunch of salespeople. Why don't we bring on somebody who's going to do that? And so it's sort of been, and sometimes we might have overhired at times to say that headache might not have been a migraine. And so now we got to figure out other things that person can do. But with that being said, I think it's sort of been just on a step-by-step needs basis, not necessarily role or position, or they have to do this, but like, this is a gap in the company. Can we fill it internally? If not, let's go bring in somebody who can do it. And sometimes it's been that person is somebody I want on our team. I don't really know what they're going to do yet, but let's make it happen. And I've done that half the time. Half of our employees are probably people who filled that sort of thing.
Well, we definitely believe and have talked about a number of episodes of the show that you hire for that character, the values fit and those things and the skills. And you said it right out of the gate today, the skills you can teach. You can teach them how to do the thing you need done, but is it the kind of person you want on the team? So makes total sense. It's a little more seat of the pants, the way you've been doing it, but knowing you totally fits and you're obviously making it work. So, now let's jump to the board side. This is an investor-driven business so far. You've raised a lot of money and you personally have gone out and done that. And then you put a board together. So that's another type of team that you work with in your business. So talk about how you went about both raising the money and finding those board members.
Yeah, something that I do feel very proud of that I did right pretty early on was I kind of found my like sort of little life advisory board around people that I respect. In certain cases, there were guys who have good families, good businesses, character that I appreciate and respect. And I sort of just wanted to be half the guys that they were, sort of thing. And so I formed that. That was like, again, early college days. And then ultimately some of those guys actually like had value in the business. And so what I formed was essentially a board of advisors around people who have an impact in the company, people who could have impact in the company as far as business folks, but also have connections, contacts, experience that could benefit us. And so we've got a great board. About half of them are investors, half of them are not. And that was pretty intentional because I don't necessarily just want it to be a financially driven board, although it's important to have financial goals and you have to keep the company alive. But I wanted to have certainly some focus around the finances and certainly some focus outside of sort of the bigger vision, like let's go take a big swing. So yeah, we've got a great board. I would say it's some of the biggest hitters that I know. And it's not just because somebody's like super impressive by their background, but what they're capable of and what they've accomplished in their lives and also the value that they bring to us. I mean, we have somebody like Rocky Howard, who's the chief people officer of the Mom Project. She comes from a diversity background. She's somebody who pushes us in areas that we might not have the ability to do ourselves or we don't have the perspective to do. We have Wade Burgess, who's an early on employee for LinkedIn, has served on a boatload of boards as an investor. He's been a chief revenue officer. He's been a CEO himself. So the experiences he can teach me through in and out are world class. And so those are just 2 of 7 of the people that we have on our board that have really, really pushed me. And so, you know, I try to have a board meeting that is, we're not afraid to throw elbows with each other. And then we can take our hats off and sit down and have a drink or a coffee or whatever it is and get to know each other as people. And that's really helped because they ask questions that are difficult and challenging for me as a CEO, but then they ask questions about my personal life because they care about me, right? And so I think that is remarkably important. And so, you know, my first, I guess, recommendation to anybody out there is form a personal advisory board. Some people who can hold you accountable to who you are as a man or a woman, but also when you get ready, start to have one as a business that you can hold yourself accountable for. Even if it's not a formal board of directors that has board responsibilities, treat it as such because it's going to help you get much, more better and better and better.
Yeah, that's great advice. And I love the idea of bringing those people on that are going to help you personally as well as help your business. And it's incredible that you started that as early as you did. Now, you classified yourself as a relatively young leader. I would affirm that. And my question is then, how has it been being a young leader, bringing on new talent. I'm assuming not everybody is your same age, and it's a little bit easier often to work with younger people than you. How have you worked with people who are older than you as the CEO and as the leader of the team when people are looking at you as maybe like, this is the young guy. Like, how does he know what we need to do here? And how have you worked through that and stayed the leader and helped build that team regardless of where people are coming from with different ages?
It's funny. Two things come to mind. So our company president, Theo, and our chief strategy officer, Jason, are both 20 years older than me. And they talk about their age all the time. So I feel comfortable sharing about that. And they've both shared to me, they're so thankful that they don't have my job. They've both been CEOs in the past. They both had their own businesses. And, there are certain things and stresses that a CEO or a founder or a C-suite team member take on that only that person does. And I think they're happy to play, the second seat or the right-hand man sort of thing, because it allows me to sort of have to make the tough decisions, and they can do what they go do best. And so, I think it's always been interesting. I've tried not to take on the know-it-all perspective because I think that equally emphasizes itself as a young leader. I think oftentimes in my experience, younger CEOs and younger founders try really hard to compensate how much they know when they're in the room of older people. And look, I'll be the first person to admit 9 times out of 10, I'm not the smartest person in the room. And the one time it's a room by myself and I'm still probably the dumbest guy. And so what I try my best to do is learn from folks older than me and put that on. Now, at the end of the day, they respect the decisions that I have to make and respect that at the end of the day, it is my decision. And so, that's certainly one piece. It's always funny too, the FTX scandal that's coming out on the crypto stuff. He was a young leader, and it's amazing how that biases the rest of the industry. I'm not necessarily talking industry regarding crypto, but industry as far as younger CEOs. People, all of a sudden have a little bit of leeriness to young CEOs again when you have a big scandal like that. And it's just, it's one of those things where I think as a young leader, the best thing you possibly can do is ask questions. You don't know enough and you never will. And so learning from those folks, but also like, don't try to be the man or the woman. Just bring on great people to help you, and great people will, and they'll support you and have your back. And I think that's a piece of why we've recruited well, is because I like other people's perspectives. I like not being the person in the room. I'll be the first to admit I suck at this. I need somebody who's better than me. And that's somebody maybe with more experience, or maybe somebody not afraid to take on a challenge. But yeah, hiring people older than you is always interesting. But I think trying the best to not make it the focus is something that's important.
I think that's all really good advice. And I love the idea of bringing people in smarter than you, for sure. You're not going to know everything about everything. And so if you can have that self-awareness and humility to bring in people that do know stuff, it just makes everybody better. And just from knowing you, you've got a really interesting personality mix of, I think, that tenacity and self-confidence to say, I do know these things, and I do want to go this direction. And that gives you that clarity when you talk about the vision. And I think you're right on that. People join you because of your ability to put an idea out there with passion that people want to follow you. And yet you can also balance that with that humility of, hey, listen, guys, I know these things and I'm firm and strong about them and going to be bold, but here's some areas where I need help. And it's not my strength, and I want to bring you in to help do that. And you've got a really nice balance. And it feels like a lot about self-awareness of knowing where your strengths are and running hard with those, and where you're not as strong, and bring people in with humility. So,
well,
that's why you've got the company you've got. So, well done.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So I know you're a learner. You're always, consuming content, whether that's through your contacts and your board and your advisors, or through books and podcasts. What are you listening to, reading, consuming right now?
It's a great question. So I use an app called Blinkist. I actually suck at reading, to be honest. I can't sit through a whole book very well because I don't sit still, but I use an app called Blinkist, and it allows you to have 15 to 20 minute audio spark notes of books. And so for pure entertainment, I have started to, over the last probably 2 months, listen to a Blink or an audiobook, like a 20-minute edition of an audiobook over history, almost one every single day. And it's something actually more to take me out of work mode and just sort of be entertained by something that I can learn. But as far as like a lot of business stuff that I get interested in to learn or consume, is I love anything by Malcolm Gladwell. He's got some big picture philosophies that I think actually can really, really help. It's things like the tipping point concept. And for us in our business, how do we go from 2, 3, 400 customers to 2, 3, 4, 5,000 customers sort of thing. And so I really, really enjoy sort of big picture idea books and lessons like that. This is not necessarily to be cheesy, but I do believe the Bible has some really, really good principles, as far as some business lessons that you can learn. One is for example, is the biblical adage that if somebody falls or falls into sin, approach them one-on-one, have a conversation with them. And if they fall again, bring in a second person who knows them well and approach it that way. And I think the same thing with business is if you have a team member that's struggling, don't call them out in front of other people. Go have a one-on-one discussion with them. If it's something that happens again, maybe bring in another team member or a leader or somebody to have that conversation with them. And I think there's some things like that. So I don't know. I try my best to learn from sort of the old adages that come from that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Trust me, you're not the first guest on the Clarity Advisor show to mention the Bible as one of their go-to resources. I mean, why would you not take advantage of 10,000 years of human history? I mean,
trust me, there's some good stuff.
Yeah, if somebody's gone before us and learned these lessons. It doesn't have to be in the last 20 years that somebody wrote a book that has some wisdom for us. So that's great stuff. So Matt, who would be somebody that should reach out to you, and what would be the best way to do that?
I have made every mistake in the book when it comes to being a startup founder, and I plan to make a whole new set of them this year. So anybody who is a business owner, somebody who wants to launch a company, happy to connect and be helpful in any way, shape, or form. As far as anybody who wants to use Wedge, we like talking to companies that have high volume hiring needs. So if, restaurants, retail, franchises, we love chatting with them. But people can reach me directly on LinkedIn. I'm just Matt Baxter on LinkedIn. Or our company website is wedgehr.com. And my email is just matt@wedgehr.com. So happy to connect with anybody in any way, shape, or form.
Great. And we'll get your contact info and your book references in the show notes. So Matt, this has been great. It's always fun catching up with you and hearing what you're up to and how you've done it. Really well done, and appreciate your time today and sharing some insights with the audience.
Thanks a ton for having me. You're great. Appreciate you, Ken.
All right, good. Well, that brings us to the end of another Clarity Advisors show. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Clarity Advisors show. Clarity Advisors is a speaking, training, and consulting firm specializing in helping you simplify your sales and operating systems to improve efficiency and grow your profits. Connect with Clarity Advisors today to learn more about how they can help you improve communication and get your team aligned and engaged for greater success.